Alright, hopefully I've started the stream this time. Hey guys, how's it going? This is Tactic Ion. I am doing a Paragon video today. I've been playing a good bit of Paragon. I've gotten 100 games in, so I figured I would do a sort of first 100 game info guide specifically geared towards people who are coming from playing Smite to give you a little bit of information about who I am as a Smite player. I have over 1,000 hours played on Smite. Most of my time is spent in regular Conquest. My second most amount of time is spent in Ranked Conquest. I stopped playing Ranked Conquest because you just kind of play the meta in that, and which means that you are playing the same gods over and over again, and you're playing against the same gods over and over again, and you're playing with the same builds against the same builds. It's very just the same. So I like playing normal Conquest because you can do different things and there's a little bit more variety. But I have over 1,000 hours played in Smite, so I have a good feeling about how Smite is. I've been playing since the end of Season 1. Um, I was in on the beta, but I didn't really get a good grip of what was going on in the beta. There weren't a ton of gods. I just kind of had a bad experience with the beta, so I started playing at the end of Season 1. Conversely, like I said, I've gotten just over 100 games done in Paragon. You can see here I have won 55 games and lost 56 games, which means I have 111 games total. 50% win-loss, 55 to 56. I have a 1205 ELO. I believe they start you off with 1200, so even after playing for 100 games, I'm pretty much average. You can look at my stats here. This is my entire game history right here. Started off pretty even, next was pretty even, had some losses, had some wins, kind of, kept me in line with stuff. Some of this is my hero choice. Some of it is my team comp versus enemy team comp. Some of it is my team's mates just not doing well or intentionally sabotaging or stuff like that. But for the most part, it's just kind of an average. Can't be much more average than almost half your wins and half your losses, right? So this is, like I said, the first 100 games. So the first thing I would like to talk about before I get into the map right here, which this is the monolith map, before I get into that, something I would like to mention is movement speed. Movement speed is really important in Smite. Um, you buy boots, you have items that you can buy which will impact your movement speed, and it'll impact your enemy's movement speed. Things like Fatalist or Frostbound Hammer or Midgardian Mail, they'll affect your attack speed and stuff like that. Those aren't really in here. There are some items that act like Fatalis and some items that act like Frostbound and Midgardian Mail, but for the most part, everybody has what feels to me like the same movement speed. There are some heroes in this game that have movement-based abilities. They'll either give themselves a boost of some kind, or it'll be a teleport like a blink, or they'll have a movement debuff where you can slow somebody down. And then, of course, you have crowd control CCs. So something to keep in mind is just that kind of everybody has the same movement speed if nothing has been applied. What that means is pathing is important. So this is the indicator for your T1 tower right here on safe lane, which is duo lane. Um, so if somebody is sieging this tower and then they're running away, if they're running away with the most optimal path and you are chasing directly behind them, you will never close the gap because they are always moving at the same speed that you're moving. Unless you can make them slow down or speed yourself up, it's just there's no point in chasing because you're never going to catch them. However, if they are making a very unoptimal pathing maneuver and they're going really wide and outside, you can undercut them by going short, and because you're moving at the same speed that they are, they're taking a longer route, you're taking a shorter route, you can catch up to them. So pathing is very important. Try to keep pathing in mind when you're playing this game. So now that we have the map up and we've kind of talked about pathing, we're going to go ahead and talk about the map layout. Starting from your side, which if you look at the map, you can see that you can rotate it and it's the same on both sides. So it doesn't really matter which side you start on, it's pretty much the same. The only difference is effectively Gold Fury and Fire Giant, which one of those spawns on your side of the river. That's about the main difference. But we'll talk about those in a minute. So you start off here, this is your fountain. you will pass your core. There are these jump pads just before your core, which will push you out to your inhibitors, which are like your phoenixes. Beyond your phoenixes, you have your tier 2 towers. Your tier 2 towers are really important because if one of them gets shut down, if one of them gets destroyed, it will shut down your jump pads. Your jump pads are important because, like I said a moment ago, movement speed is important in this and pathing is important in this. The jump pads will save you about 5 seconds of movement speed from having to walk out of your base, which doesn't sound like much, but it kind of is when you're just walking. On top of that, when you multiply that across 5 people, that's almost 30 seconds every time your entire team leaves base. So having that extra movement speed is useful. You definitely want to, if you're pushed up here and you see that they're attacking this tower here, you want to back and defend that thing. You don't want to sit there and think, oh, my teammates will get it. No, you want to go defend that because you want your jump pads to stay up as long as possible. Up next here, your tier 1 towers. Um, they are kind of really just for show, I feel. They don't do a whole lot of damage. You know, in Smite at level 1, you can take 2 shots from a tier 1 tower and it'll kill you. In Paragon, you could take 4 shots from a tier 1 tower and still walk away. On top of that, the shots come a lot slower from these towers than they do in Smite. You know, in Smite, the moment you enter tower range, it shoots you, and the moment that that shot hits you, the next shot gets fired. So you're under continuous fire the moment you enter towers and Smite. In Paragon, you enter the tower, it acquires you, it waits a second or two, and then it shoots, and then it waits another second or two, and then it shoots. And like I said, you can take up to 4 hits without dying. Like, you'd still get out after 4 hits. So you kind of have almost 10 seconds of being able to dive a tower at level 1. It's kind of ridiculous. Um, but anyways, so that's your side, and then you go into the enemy's tier 1s, the enemy's tier 2s. Like I said, rush down the enemy's tier 2s because you'll deny them their jump pads. Super important. It helps you get that extra movement speed. You don't realize it, but if you're moving 5 seconds faster and they're moving 5 seconds slower, that's a net speed of 10 seconds. You will get to the lane 10 seconds faster than somebody coming out of that side. All right, so that's something to keep in mind. The next you have their inhibitors, which are like the phoenixes. If you kill the inhibitors, it's like killing the phoenixes. You will spawn super minions the same way that you spawn fire minions. And then finally, there's the core on their end, which, like I said, is like your Titan. It just does a radiant effect. Anything within the core's range takes damage, unlike the Titan where it attacks one character. Um, Something finally keep in mind is if you enter the enemy's fountain, you instantly die. There is no you lose health, there is no cheesing. The moment you touch their fountain, you die. I know this because I've done it accidentally a couple of times. All right, so that's sort of the map layout. Um, just as it is, something I haven't really talked about yet is the jungle. I said that the jungle is pretty much the same with the exception of these. Something you can look at is you can see this is the safe lane jungle. You can see that the jungle layout is pretty much the same thing on their safe lane side. What you have, if I come over to here, you can see there is a green buff, 2 white buffs, another white buff, and 2 white buffs on this side, and then a gold buff. And then there's a purple buff there, and then there's this blue thing here. So we're going to kind of talk about all those really quick. So this green buff is this guy right here. Something that I haven't mentioned yet is last hitting. Last hitting is important in this game. It's very similar to last hitting in League of Legends. Last hitting doesn't matter so much in Smite. It does give you a little bit more, and it's important if you're stacking items. But in this game, last hitting is what matters. So you really want to get your last hits in. The person who gets a last hit on this green guy right here gets a shield buff. The shield buff provides a shield to you, obviously, so that you don't take direct damage anymore. The shield starts taking damage. But anybody that strikes the shield will receive damage reflected back to them at some small percentage. And there's a timer on the shield buff as well. So once the shield is either depleted because it's taken enough damage or the timer runs out, the shield will explode, dealing damage within an area. This makes it incredibly useful for your jungler. I don't know how many times I have had to argue this point to other people in the game. Please don't steal the green buff from your jungler. It provides them with a shield, and most of the junglers are melee, which means that they have to get point blank range to fight the other jungle buffs. there are up to 5 minions at the other jungle buff camps. And as you can see, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there's 25 jungle buff minions potentially on the field. And just on your side, that's not even counting the 25 on their side. And being able to knock out these 15 right here is incredibly useful. Why is this useful? Well, the jungle behaves a little bit differently when farming in Paragon than it does in Smite. In Smite, if you kill a jungle buff, it gives experience and gold to whoever's nearby. In Paragon, it is sort of a collective thing. As your jungle takes out jungle buffs, it charges up this white ring right here. These are your card points. It's very similar to your gold. What you will see is you will see this yellow part. That is confirmed points. Those are last hits you've gotten on minions, and you're guaranteed you've already gotten these points. But this white bar here are points that are generated in the jungle from killing the minion camps that look like this in the jungle, or from killing this guy, or any of the other jungle camps. You fill up this white bar. What that white bar is filling up is what's called your amber link, which is the little thing that's here. It's this ball, but it's sitting right here on the map, just off to the side of the green buff. And on the enemy side, it's just off the side of their green buff, right next to the lower level white buffs there, regular XP camps. What this is it holds the card points that are being generated from collecting the jungle camps. And once it fills up for you, you get all those points. Or once the amber link fills up, it will then secure those points so that you get them. It's useful because it means that while your jungler is doing the jungle, even if you're not assisting them, even if you're not near them, you are still getting farm from the jungle. This is another reason why it's important to let the jungler get the green buff, because it allows them an easier way to clear the jungle camps, which in turn gives everybody more farm, not just the jungler. Everybody gets more farm from this. It's also why you're encouraged to attack the enemy's amber link, because they will lose they will start to lose that white bar, and they will start to fill up your white bar more. So it's kind of like you're stealing their unsecured points. As long as you can do it before the amber link transmits all of the points away, which I believe happens on a timer or once it's filled up. As long as you can steal points from them, it's useful, but it's not as useful as collecting the jungle buffs. You get more points from collecting the jungle buffs than you do from stealing from the enemy, but stealing from the enemy does have the twofold effect, like I said, from coming out of the base. That 5 second plus that you have and the 5 second minus that they have combines together to make a 10-second difference. If you take 25 card points from, if you it takes 25 to fill up to the 100, right? So if you take 25 from them continuously, they will be at a 50 deficit per strike, because you get 25, they lose 25. That's kind of how this game works, right? It's how most MOBAs work. So that fills up that bar there. That is what that's useful for. Try to let your jungler get those things. Up next, we have these mid buffs that are in these little alcoves right here. There are 4 types of buffs that pop up there: a red buff, a blue buff, a black buff, and a purple buff. The red buff is damage. The purple buff is shadow plane, which means you go invisible until you perform an action or you receive damage. The black buff is damage over time. And I can't remember what the blue buff does at the moment. I want to say movement speed. I believe it's movement speed. Something to keep in mind, though, is that collecting these buffs at early game takes 3 basics, at mid game takes 2, at late game takes 1. But the important part, the thing that I like, is that they regenerate your mana for you. So this is why they're really important for the mid laner, because the mid laner can see that there's a buff up, dump all of their abilities to clear out this wave, come over here and grab this buff. They'll get all of their mana back. Plus, let's say they get the black buff. They'll have damage over time. So they come back, and now they can just use one ability on the next wave, and it'll do its damage plus additional damage over time. Or they get the red buff. They have additional damage. Something else is useful is your jungler could get it, which I do a lot when I'm the jungler. because I will use my abilities to clear out these camps quicker. Then I'll run in, I'll grab whatever the buff is, and that'll regenerate my mana, and it'll give me a sort of incentive to either gank mid lane or gank one of the side lanes, depending on which side I'm on, because now I have either additional movement speed so people can't get away from me. Like I said earlier, movement speed is really important, or I'll be invisible, which is incredibly useful, or I will have damage over time or additional damage that I do when I attack them. So letting your mid lane or your jungler get this buff is kind of useful. Normally you see it going to mid lane because the jungler already has a green buff on them, or you know, it's sometimes, at least in the early game, it's more useful for the mid laner to get like a red buff or a black buff than it is for the jungler to get it, because they're going to be doing continuous damage in lane. Um, then you have over here these highlights. These are gold buffs. They're more for your carry to get. They give your carry, they give whoever gets the last hits. Like I said, the last hits are very important in this game. They give whoever gets the last hits a bonus card points and bonus experience. So when you're trying to feed your carry, you want to make sure your carry gets the last hit on these gold buffs and that you have waves to clear with it. You don't want to come in here and take the gold buff, but it turns out that you don't have any minions to clear. Otherwise, you've just kind of wasted all the time getting that gold buff, and you're not going to get any benefit out of it. So that's something to try and keep in mind. Also useful to know is that when you get to a later part in the game, the carry probably won't need it anymore, so other people can carry it, can pick it up if they're behind, normally like a support character or a mid lane character if they've been shut down, or the off lane character if they've been shut down. Something to watch out for is if their off lane pushes up, they may potentially take it, and that'll help them sort of come back up from the pressure that you've applied earlier. Um, so those are kind of the roles, the positions, the buffs. Something I haven't mentioned, I kind of touched on, is this section right here and this section right here. These are the Raptors. They are kind of like Gold Fury. Early game, you can't really do it by yourself. You kind of need a team. Mid game, one or two people can do them. Late game, you can pretty much solo them as long as you're not specific characters. And on this side, you have the Orb Prime, which is kind of like the Fire Giant. The difference is the Orb Prime will give you a bonus depending on cards that you've picked. If you've built your own deck, you get to choose how the Orb Prime affects you. If you're using the standard deck, it affects you the same way every time because it's a standard deck. So we'll get into that a little bit more later when we talk about deck building. So I've talked about farming, where the last hits are very important. I've talked about tower diving, where the tower, it's really easy to dive. Something that I've not really talked about is pacing. Because you're focused on last hits, the pacing of this game is a little bit slower than Smite's. The minions seem to take more damage. They can handle more damage. So it's a lot similar to the laning phases that are done in League of Legends, where you're kind of just dancing around trying to pressure out your opponent and securing last hits for you while denying last hits for them. That's kind of how you play the game. And like I said, that kind of makes playing the off lane kind of annoying because at the start of the game you're already pushed out because it's 2-1. Um, and because of that, you play defensively, you sit back under your tower, but like I said, it's really easy to dive towers, so you kind of have to play back even further, and what that means is the pacing is just kind of slow because early game the carries can't clear well, so they need those last hits. But then they'll take poke damage because what else are you going to do as an offlaner? Or maybe the jungle comes over and ganks. And in that time, they have to go back and they have to return to base. And now the offlaner can get some can get some farm in. But then, carry shows back up and you're back to being, bullied out. It just kind of makes the game slower feeling. It feels kind of like it feels half as slow. I guess the better way of saying that is Smite feels twice as fast as this game, which kind of makes sense because the surrender point in Smite is 10 minutes. The surrender point in this game is 20 minutes. So it's kind of like, I guess that's what they're going for. Something else that's really noticeable is, let's say you're Poseidon or Scylla. You can walk up at level 1 and you will clear the wave at level 1. You will not clear a wave at level 1 with one ability in this game. You just won't. Like, you're not going to. Heck, I have a clip here A bit later on, I could show you of where I use my ult at 40 minutes in and I still don't full clear the wave with this character. And that's using an ult. Imagine using your Kraken on a wave or using raw ult on the wave at 40 minutes in and it doesn't clear the wave. Like that's the pacing that this game has. So if you're looking for a fast-paced game, this only has it when team fights occur. There's only moments where things feel fast paced. Everything else about this game is very kind of like poking out and doing some damage here and there and trying to get to the buffs and stuff like that. The rest of it, it's kind of farming. You're focused on getting those last hits. Oh, something I did forget to mention was the fog walls. This is what separate the jungles from the lane. You know, in Smite, you don't really have a good idea of where the jungle starts. It's kind of based off of feel as you play. You get a good understanding of how much you can see into the jungle from lane. Here, it's very obvious. If you're standing right here on this side of the fog wall, and there's an enemy standing on the other side of the fog wall, you will not see each other unless you have a teammate that can see them or you have a ward that can see them. You won't know they're there. They won't know you're here. So that is something to keep in mind. Um, but so I've got this screen up. Excuse me. I've got this screen up so that I can talk about characters. Um, there's only 25 characters right now. I believe they're talking about a 26th character. But I'm going to kind of run through these characters real quick to give you an idea of who they are similar to in Smite and what their abilities kind of are and whether or not you should play them as a starting character within your first 100 games. I can kind of give you a feel of how things are going to go. So first up, we have Countess. She's kind of like Loki. Her ult is very similar to Loki's, but she has like a line ability which is very similar to like Poseidon's Wave or Sun Wukong's Cudgel. She's very much ability based. You don't really do attack damage with her. You kind of just build up your ability power, and then you kind of play her early game. You can play her doing line damage and area damage, and once you get your ult up, you kind of start playing her like Loki slash Ao Kuang. You want to show up on somebody who's taken damage. You want to gank people. Use your ult to do significant amounts of damage. She has kind of a unique ability where she teleports to an enemy and then she can teleport back to where she teleported from. That can be used very strategically, but until you get comfortable with using it, it's kind of like Kronos' Rewind. Until you get really good at using Kronos' Rewind, you kind of just use it under very specific scenarios. For her, it's really easy just to walk up to where you can teleport to an enemy. You teleport to them, you hit them with your ult, and then you teleport back to where you came from. Just an in and out. You do significant amount of damage. Maybe you get a kill or something. You get away from it. That's kind of how you play her. Kind of like a Loki, kind of like an Ao Kuang. Up next, we have Crunch. Crunch is one of my favorite heroes to play. He kind of plays like Osiris, old schooler Osiris, like season 2 Osiris, um, where you are up in everybody's face. You're doing lots of melee damage all up on them. You have the ability to slow people. You have the ability to kind of root people. You have the ability to do massive amounts of burst damage. He's all about using his combos correctly. It's kind of hard to describe his ult. It's not hard to describe his ult. It's hard to describe his ult's usefulness. So his ult is to re-perform whatever the last ability you did was. So, um, and then every 3 abilities you do sort of an enhanced version of whatever that ability is. And what this means is you start working together these fun combos. He's really good to put attack speed on. If you can't tell, I really enjoy playing him. I like playing him in the jungle. But like I said, you put attack speed on, and what you can do is like you can do like a right hook, which does sort of cleave damage where you hit people on either side of it, and then you can do an uppercut, which does the slow, and then you do another uppercut, which will be enhanced because it's your third ability, which will knock them up in the air, which is kind of like a stun. It's a knock up. So you have, which is on top of the slow. So you have like significant control over locking people down. Um, or you can get in, start doing damage to people, maybe while you're boxing them and landing abilities, you can move around them, and then you have sort of this driving strike where at uh, if it's used regularly, it'll just kind of close the distance for you and allow you to hit somebody and do some damage to them. But if it's on its third ability and it's enhanced, you'll use them to push people backwards, which is really useful. You can knock people into your tower. You can knock people out from their towers. You can separate somebody from the group. Um, there's just a bunch of different combinations you can do with his abilities, and I enjoy him. He's a lot of fun. I recommend you pick him up and play him. Um, just like I said, look to try and play him as a jungler. He's very fun in that role, at least for me. Up next, we have Decker. She is a guardian. She's a support. Um, she has like a stun ball, so she can knock people, make them stay still. She kind of has like area effect abilities, so she can hit people within a range. I believe it applies a slow or a speed if you're on the same team. Um, Her ultimate is like an Odin ult, where you throw up a cage and people on the enemy team can't pass through the cage, but your teammates can. If they're trapped inside the cage, it gives you benefits. I don't believe it does like the Odin style. If somebody dies inside of it, you get like power, but I'm not fully familiar with her yet. I just know that her ult is basically like Odin's ult. You can try playing her. I haven't really played her that much. I see people playing her every now and then. Her big benefit is her stun ball. Up next, we have Feng Mao. He plays kind of like Guan Yu, at least in terms of how his basic attack works, because he has similar spear bladed thing. I can't remember what it's called, like a halberd, but it's not a halberd. Um, but anyways, he's got the same weapon that Guan Yu has. He kind of uses it similar to Guan Yu as you're doing your basic attacks. Um, he has, instead of like the Tallow Assault, he has this sort of spin in place thing, which is kind of similar to Tallow Assault, but instead of shredding protections, it just does damage. Instead of providing heal like Guan Yu does, he will put a shield on himself. He has a teleport instead of a dash, and his ultimate is a knock up instead of a stun. It's very Guan Yu feeling. He just looks very Guan Yu when you play him. If you like Guan Yu, you're probably gonna like this guy. Um, try him out. He's good in off lane. He's good in jungle. Just remember, if you're playing an off lane, it's 2v1, and he's a melee character, so it does kind of put you at a bit of a disadvantage until you get to later in the game where you have a good amount of shield. Up next, we have Gadget. She is a decent mid laner and off laner. She has good area abilities. I'm trying to think of who she's like. Um, she's kind of like Apwash, I guess, because you throw something away from her and it does damage kind of away from her. It can attach to people, kind of like Apwash's 3. Um, that's like the best I can give you for it. Her ult is a giant ball of death. Anything inside the ball just takes continuous damage. Um, she's an okay mid. She's not nearly as good as Gideon, who's the next person here. Gideon is like Hades, kind of. His ultimate is kind of Hades' ult, except you have the ability to do it in the air. There's 3D environments here, so you're playing with some verticality. So you can ult above people and they won't know what the hell's going on. That's happened to me a bunch of times. He also has a slow. He has a teleport, which like a blink, which you can use, but it leaves behind a trail that your teammates can use. This guy is very very versatile. I have a 100% win rate with him. Um, I've played him in just about every position except for carry, but honestly, you can carry with him because he has an AoE damage. Like nobody can really escape him. Nobody can really catch him. As long as you play well with him, you were pretty much guaranteed to dominate until you get to higher level gameplay where people are coordinating properly to take you out. Because that's what you have to do. You have to bait out his ult, and you have to bait out his teleport, and then he's kind of screwed. All he has left is his slow, and at that point, if there's more than one of you, he can only slow one of you, and he has to look at you. It's kind of like a knock slow. He has to hold you and sit you there while he's moving backwards, and he moves slower. So His slow is kind of like a Nox slow. His ult's kind of like Hades' ult, and he has a blink and he has like an area effect damage. Um, very very easy character to play with. I highly recommend you play it with him. Like I said, any role, he's good anywhere. You can put him in the jungle, and he's great. Up next, we have Greystone. He's more of a support character. He's kind of like a Kumbhakarna. His ultimate is very similar to Kumbhakarna's passive. He doesn't die if his ultimate's up. Instead, what happens is he radiates a circle, and anybody that's within that circle is slowed. Then he shoots up into the air, comes crashing back down about 2 seconds later, and then when he crashes back down, anybody that's still inside that circle range takes damage. Um, he's very useful for going in and just brawling in people's face. If that's the gameplay that you want to play where you're in people's face, you kind of want to play with this guy because even when you die, you don't die. Like you die, you have to be killed twice. And he has a jump so he can get away from people. And he has an area effect around him, so if people are trying to stick on you, well, you can, you know, do damage to them continuously while they're stuck to you. He's a pretty decent guy for beginners, and you see him played a lot as a beginner. Um, I highly recommend checking him out, even though he is incredibly annoying, like Kumbhakarna is. Up next is Grimmix. He's like a lesser version of Rama. He doesn't have a role, so he can't get away from people. He has a displacement ball, which will knock people away from the ball, but you have to aim it at the ground, and he lobs it. So there's kind of like some weird physics that comes along with it. I will be completely honest. Almost every single time I try to use his displacement ball, it works against me. I almost always end up launching the opponent that I want to move away from me towards me. It just closes the gap for him. Um, he has a slow built into his kit, but it doesn't penetrate through people like Rom's does, and you can't sit there and regenerate off of it like you can with Rom. So it he's just a lesser Rom. His ultimate is kind of like a Neath ultimate. It's a guaranteed hit as long as somebody's within range. Unlike Neath, where Neath, as long as she can see somebody on the map, she can shoot them. You have to be in range for this person to lock onto you. He has to be able to physically see you. But the moment he sees you and starts his lock, it doesn't matter if you run away, if you get out of his line of sight, he can shoot it. It'll go through walls, it'll go through minions, it'll go through whatever, unless it hits another hero. Somebody can tank it for you just like you can an Ethol. And so, you know, he's like that. He doesn't have the mobility, he doesn't have the dashes or anything, and he has a Neath ult, which you have to be close enough to see somebody for. So, kind of not that great. I recommend not playing him. But next is Grux. Grux you can play in the jungle. Grux you can play in support. Grux you can play in solo lane. He is a fun person to play as. He's kind of like an Amir and a Sobek combined together. He has sort of a cone effect like Amir's freeze, but it will do, or Sobek's uh, uh, um, slash with his axe where he gets the heal off of it. But instead of doing those things, what he does is he pulls people towards him. He also has a dash, which allows him to go through people. Um, or you can just use it to close the distance and then snag somebody with a pull, or you can use it to get away from people. Very, very versatile. You can get in and out. You can do lots of damage with him. His ultimate is he smashes his clubs together, and anybody within range of him when he smashes his clubs together gets stunned, and I believe he gets an increased bonus damage, which is kind of like an Osiris ult. So, a standard tactic is to use your dash to get in next to somebody, then start doing damage, and then as they try to get away from you, you hit them with the pull, so you pull them back towards you, and then you do your ultimate and you start smacking them. He also has an ability which will apply a bleed. So if you realize that somebody's about to get away from you and there's not, and like you've already used your pull, what you can do is you can hit them with the bleed, and as they're running away from you, they'll continue to take damage. Just very, very useful person. I recommend playing with him. He's very fun. Um, Up next, you have Howitzer, who's one of my favorites. Um, he's a mid laner. You can play him in off lane if you want, but he's very useful in the mid. He has a long range explosive, which will do area damage. And when I say long range, I mean you can shoot it through a tower and kill somebody on the other side of a tower. I use him to kill Gideons all the time. He is incredibly fun to play with. He has a good bit of movement items as well, as long as you use them properly. He has a mine which he'll launch on the ground, and it's a displacement mine, so you can knock yourself away and you can knock enemies away. So if somebody's really, all up on you, what you can do is you can kind of just look down at the ground, shoot this mine between the two of you, detonate it, and it'll blow them backwards and it'll blow you forwards and it'll knock you away from each other. Super useful. He also has 3 mines that he shoots out, which are slow mines. They're proximity based, so if somebody walks through them, they'll take damage and they'll be slowed. Or you can detonate them if you want. They shoot out in kind of a cone pattern, which is useful because if you look straight down, you'll shoot all 3 of them in the same spot, and then all 3 of them will apply a slow. So if somebody's on you, like I said before, you can shoot your mine down. If you've already used your mine, you can do this and shoot your slow down. His ultimate is he launches up in the air and he kind of just does like he has a ring where anything in that ring just takes significant amount of damage. Um, it's really easy to dodge his ult, so I tend to use his ult to clear waves, either waves that have been pushed really aggressively against me, I'll just clear them, or if I'm trying to make an aggressive push, I'll use his ult to clear the wave, or if I know I'm about to back, I'll use his ult just to clear the wave to put some pressure on the enemy so that way I can back and make it back to lane before they're able to push up to the tower. Um, it's kind of how I use him. If you want to use his ult to attack people, you can use it if you gank. I've used it successfully in a gank before, but after doing that twice, people realized what was going on. So it's very obviously telegraphed. So what you want to do is you want to use it in conjunction with somebody else. So like if Grux does his thing where he dashes forward and grabs somebody and pulls them close to him, and then hits them with his ult so that they're stunned. If you know that Grux is about to do that, when you see him dash in and land his pull, that's when you should ult with Howitzer, because that would guarantee that you're going to do damage to those people as well. Um, like I said, all around good person to play as. I had fun playing with him. You can even play with him as a carry because his basic attacks do splash damage. So something to keep in mind. Up next is Iggy and Scorch. They're right here. They are kind of underpowered. I've heard some people complain about them. People will definitely ask you not to play as Iggy and Scorch. Um, the reason for that is because So what he does is he throws down these like flame turrets, or he'll throw down oil, which then can be lit on fire. And he has a dash which leaves oil behind, but the dash isn't for really long and doesn't really give you a ton of movement speed or go really far. That's kind of like it's kind of indicative of his kit. Just everything is kind of underwhelming. It doesn't work well. Maybe he is was good in the previous maps. Maybe you could use him in interesting and conventional ways, but the way that things are now, he's just not good. I recommend not playing with him. His ult is you kind of get a flamethrower for about 4 seconds, but it's really easy to dodge. It's really easy to get away from. There's He's just super easy to not have to deal with. So I recommend not playing him. You If you play him and you succeed, congratulations, it's awesome. But more often than not, you're gonna get ganked because your dash isn't good. You can't get away. You have no peel. You have no knockback. Like Howitzer, like I said, you have 3 things that prevent people from getting to you. You have something that knocks you back. You have something that knocks them back as well. You have something that slows them, and you have an ult which takes you completely out away from the fight for 4 seconds while you're up in the air shooting. Like significantly better compared to somebody who can't even dash. You know. Up next, you have Kalari. You'll see a lot of people picking her because of her ultimate. Her ultimate is a teleport. It's like an Athena ult, but to the enemies. You will Athena ult to the enemies anywhere on the map, and what it does is it first lets you see where every enemy is on the map, and then you have the option to ult to them within 4 seconds. You don't have to ult to them. You can cancel it and not do anything. Normally, what you see people do is you play her kind of like Ao Kuang Loki. You can go invisible with her. When you come, if you strike from your invisibility, you do 250% additional damage. So she's amazing at getting poke damage off. She has great gank potential at all times. She's really bad at farming. So if you're playing against people who know to ward or how to fall back and not really worry about her, you're kind of screwed because you can't farm. So you have to go to lane and steal farm from other people, which sucks. You know, if you go to solo lane, you're going to be putting your solo laner even further behind. If you go to mid lane, you're splitting wave with mid lane, so you're putting your mid lane behind. If you go to dual lane, you're now three-way splitting, so it's just inefficient. So she's easily counterable up until the point where she hits level 5. At that point, she has her ult, but it's kind of like an Ao Kuang ult. You kind of need other people to do damage first before you can really get in there and make use of your ult. Um, but at low level gameplay, people aren't playing very well, so it's really common for people to pick her and then they're able to dominate with her because you know, people aren't experienced yet. So trying to give you that heads up. If you want that Loki Ao Kuang experience, you will definitely get it from her. But the flip side of that is if people are wisened up to how she's played, then you're kind of just there for the match. Like you're just waiting for stuff to happen instead of making stuff happen, which sucks. But like I said, the tower diving is really strong in this game, so it's not super terrible. You can make plays with her, but it's just all about making sure you gank well with her. She is not a farmer at all, so you will not get your jungle farm going until way late in the game. Probably too late for it to really matter, unless you've done some serious ganking. Up next, you have Chimera. Chimera is um, incredibly overpowered at lower level gameplay, like where, if you're just starting out, he's incredibly powerful there. At higher level games, he's super easy to shut down. Once you know how to play against him, it's like Kalario. As soon as you know how to play against them, you can just shut them down because you can deny them all the time. What makes him powerful is he has a jump which is guaranteed to hit. As long as you are in range, when he chooses to use his jump on you, he is guaranteed to land on you. And this sucks because of the movement speed thing. Once he's guaranteed to land on you, you can't get away from him. And he has a slow in his kit, so he guarantees gets close to you, hits you with a slow, starts doing crazy basic attack damage to you because that's what his kit's for. And then, let's say you are able to get away from him after all that stuff goes on. Well, his jump's back up. His jump is up on a really low cooldown because it's an aggressive jump, but it's also a guaranteed hit, so you can never juke it. It's annoying as hell. You can never juke his jump because it's guaranteed to hit you. But then the flip side of that is he can only ever jump in. So the way that you counter him is you either get in a position where he can't jump in at you, or if he does jump in at you, you and your teammates can punish him. Maybe you're under tower, maybe you have 3 teammates near you. The moment he jumps on one of you, everybody just lights him up. His ultimate is kind of like Grux's ultimate. It gives him additional bonus damage, attack speed, and I believe it stuns you for a second while you're there. Like I said, incredibly useful at early game, at low levels of play. But the moment that you play against a team that knows how to counter him, you're screwed. You're just there. At least he can farm. Kalari cannot farm, so there is that. You can go around and clear jungle camps and stuff. Up next, we have Kwang, or Quang. I'm not really sure how to pronounce his name. He is played kind of like Chalk. Like that's the best way I can describe him. One of his abilities is he throws his sword to a place on the map, and then you can affect the things at that area where he threw his sword. But then you also have to go pick his sword back up. Not really something you have to do with Chalk. Chalk stuff teleports back to him. You can teleport to your sword same way as Chalk can teleport to his axe, but and that's I believe his ult. But yeah, but he's better suited as a jungler. He's great because if you throw his axe or you throw his sword rather, and it lands on somebody, it will pin them. It'll stun them and keep them. Well, it won't stun them. It'll root them. It'll pin them there and allows you to close the distance and make use of that. Or let's say you're doing a gank, you don't have to be fully up next to them because he's a melee character. You could be on your way and land a pin, and then let's say you're ganking off lane, well then your dual lane can push up and make advantage of the fact that you've pinned this guy. So he's more utility until you get in the late game where he has significant amount of damage. Next is Lieutenant Bellica or Belicia. I don't know how to pronounce her name either. She is a guardian support person. She's very interesting because her entire kit works off of mana. I believe she's the only person who does this. Um, she has an area ability, which, depending on how many people get affected by it, will generate mana for her. She has an area ability, which will steal mana from the enemy. Her ultimate is it does damage based on the amount of mana you're missing, which I've been a howitzer before, and I had 1600 health and I had 1900 mana. I was completely out of mana. She showed up and ulted me, and I instantly died because she did 1 point of damage for each point of mana that I was missing, and I had 1900 points of mana missing, so I took 1900 points of damage. I only had 1600 health. Like, super useful in that scenario. So, but then, once you know that, the easy way to counter her is just never get below half mana. Or if you are below half mana, make sure you're not below half health. You know, that's how you counter her. Let's see. Up next is Murdoch. Murdoch is a carry. He's very similar to Artemis because he has traps, but his traps aren't like Artemis's where they can instantly capture people. They take 2 seconds to activate. So you kind of have to use his traps strategically. Something that I like doing is putting his traps on like the side of um, one of these fog gates. So that way, if somebody's trying to gank me, they get stuck. Or if I push through to a fight on the other side and I know I need to fall back, I can fall back through the fog gate and I can potentially bait somebody to come in and step in the trap and then you shoot them. You can throw the traps down in lane. Like I said, keep in mind that it takes 2 seconds for the trap to activate, but once the trap is up, it's up in lane. It's also incredibly visible. Everyone knows that that's a trap. It's an unbelievably visible trap. Um, but what's useful about that is you can use it to create distance between you and your enemy. So, you know, if somebody's chasing you, you can kind of run around your trap and continue to do, basic attack damage to them because you're ranged. And as long as that person's melee, unless they want to step into the trap and be frozen, you can just sit there and plink away at them. They kind of have to leave you alone. So, its traps have some benefit, but it's like you have to play with them in one of two scenarios. You only have one trap out at a time. So, you either have to play strategically, like I said, with placing them near like the fog gates and shutting down avenues of ganks and stuff like that, or you can play with them in everybody's face and you just try and play around them and use them strategically, like in combat. Um, he has an ability called Buckshot, which is sort of an area effect. It's just its protection shred is not super great. I tend to use it a lot on minions. You can use it on the heroes, but honestly, the amount of protection shred it does, I don't really see much of a difference. Maybe I'm doing something wrong. One ability that he has that is really nice though is he has a knockback ability, which is great when people like Chimera, let's say, jumps you. You can push him back, and then he can't jump you again, because you'll be outside of his jump range. So that's kind of useful. His ultimate is like a raw snipe. It's a laser beam that you can shoot anywhere on the map. It goes through anything. So you can, and it has infinite range. So somebody could be at their base and you could be at your base and you could sniper from across the map. It's incredibly satisfying to use and get somebody with it. It's incredibly annoying to be somebody who gets sniped by him. Same way as it's incredibly annoying to be somebody who gets ulted by Kalari, because there's nothing you can do about it. You have half of a second where the laser comes out. You have that half a second to dodge the laser. That's it. It's not really enough time, and the laser is a massive hitbox on it, so it's pretty much guaranteed to hit you unless you are moving left to right and he doesn't track you properly, or you're on an incline and you move up above it or down below it. And I've had that happen before. I didn't know the terrain properly and I completely missed because I thought somebody was going to stay at the level they were at and they moved upwards. So keep that in mind if you're playing against him. Try not to get super low. Make sure you back or heal or something before you get below like a quarter health because he can just ult you and kill you. Up next is Muriel. She is like Athena. That's where her ult is. Her ult is an Athena ult. Her rest of her abilities, they apply a shield to anybody on your team. So she just gives you like Kepri shields with Athena ult. That's effectively her. You can play her if you want. Some people do. I don't really play her that much. You have Narbash. Narbash is a pure support character. His first ability is a movement speed buff. It applies to everybody on your team within range. It even applies to minions. His next ability is a passive ability that you can toggle on and off. It is a health regeneration increase. It's basically like turning on sovereignty and turning off sovereignty. You turn it on, suddenly, there's an additional 35 health per second regeneration. So boom, you start taking up your health really quick and your allies start taking it up really quick. Then you turn it off and you're not wasting mana anymore. That's what his next ability is. Um, he has one CC ability called Thwack. It's super satisfying to use. It's pretty easy to use. It stuns for a good amount of time. I use it to secure kills quite often, or maybe steal kills, whatever. It's very enjoyable. And his ultimate is a area effect slow with a knockup at the end of it. But the problem with his ult is it can be interrupted. So, if you're near a Narbash and he's ulting you, you can interrupt him. Just hit him with a stun and it stops his ult. It's incredibly infuriating. I don't recommend playing as him because of it. Um, you have a much better experience as support playing either Muriel or Greystone. Up next is Rampage. He is effectively the tank from Left 4 Dead. There's nothing else to say about him because he is effectively the tank for Left 4 Dead. That's how you play him. He even picks up a rock and throws it like the tank from that's how you play him. You play him like the tank. Um, one thing I will say is he has a jump, which when you ult, it's even further. You can jump incredibly increased distance. But when you ult, your hitbox increases, so you're a lot easier to get shot. You're a bigger target. It's kind of like he hulks out. He gets massive. Um, Something to keep in mind though is he has crazy health regeneration when his ult starts to end. His ult is kind of like um I don't know, I would say it's kind of like you get a Kali health regeneration off of it. You pretty much get a full heal off of his ult. It's infuriating. He's kind of like Greystone. If you don't but with Greystone, even if you kill him, he still comes back. With Rampage, if you don't kill him as you're bursting him down, he's just gonna heal back up off of it. So you kind of have to all in him or you won't get anything. Definitely not going to win against him in a 1v1 as long as he knows what he's doing. Up next you have Richter. Richter is a support character. He has a pluck. You can throw out a chain and drag people to you, kind of like Scorpion from Mortal Kombat. He has a swipe which will silence people and make them move slow. He has kind of an area effect damage, which is like putting on Mystical Mail. Everybody within range just takes continuous damage over time. And his ultimate is a stun. Anybody in front of him within a cone area or who's touching him, when he pops his ult, they will be stunned. They will also take damage, but you mostly just use it for the stun. Um, Next up, we have Sevarog. He looks like Hades, but he does not play like Hades. He has a pen, he has a knockback, he has a dash, and he has a massive damage boost. Um, you can try playing with him. He's very much an off-lane pick because of his mobility and because of his ability to knock people around and stuff. I've played against Sevarogs who are really good. They dashed past me, turned around and hit me with a knockback and bumped me into tower. You pull that combo off, you're pretty good. It's not hard to pull off, especially at early level against people who don't know what they're doing. So it's not exactly somebody I would recommend as a starter person, but not really a lot of damage if you try him. Up next, you have Sparrow. She is like a bad Artemis. I don't even know what all of her abilities do. I just know that one of her abilities is like Artemis's 3. Um, Anytime I see her get picked, she gets destroyed. I highly recommend don't pick her. Up next, you have Steel. He is a tank. He's kind of fun to play. He has an ultimate, which kind of jumps you into battle. Uh, does a significant amount of damage. It knocks people up. He has a dash, which knocks people up. You can put down a shield, which takes up pretty much the whole lane. Nobody can shoot through it, which is kind of interesting. I haven't seen what happens when Murdoch shoots through it because Murdoch ult's supposed to shoot through everything, but Steel ult's supposed to block any shot. So not really sure what happens there. Um, but if you or an ally passes through your shield, you get movement buff. If an enemy passes through your shield, they get movement debuff. So that's really useful as well. Um, I would recommend picking him if you're interested in brawling. You know, he's seems like a fun guy to play. Up next, you have Faye. She's listed as a guardian, but she's really kind of more of a solo laner. Not super good enough to be in mid lane, but not terrible enough that she can't hold solo by herself, or rather off lane by herself. Um, she has an area effect damaging ability. She has a line damaging ability that has a slow to it. She has sort of a sniper, like long range, single target damage ability, which is good for sort of cleaning up kills. And her ultimate is like a tether. You throw it on the ground. If anybody was in range of it when you threw it on the ground, they will be pulled to it after a certain amount of time. Um, the recommended combo for her is to throw out your ultimate, throw out your area damage ability, and then throw out your slow. And what that does is it pulls people into your area damage ability, and then it slows them to ensure that they take the full damage from it. Um, she's not terrible as an early game, as a first 100 player type pick, but she's not the best. If you're looking for variety player, she's not terrible, like I said, but she does feel like she has more movement speed than other people. I will say that. But for the most part, I don't know. I feel like there's other people who are better than her. And then finally, you have Twin Blast. He's kind of like playing Apollo. Um, you have your basics. He's a carry, so you get your basics off. He has two guns, and so he's kind of shooting them pow pow one after the other, kind of slow. One of your abilities is a triple burst, so you'll shoot 1, 2, 3 really quickly. It does some additional damage based off of how much damage you've built. So he is kind of he's kind of card oriented. You want to build damage on him, um, and attack speed and lifesteal. Something else that let's see, he has a dash, but his dash isn't like a really far moving dash. It's not like Apollo's slide. It's really more of dodge, an ability real quick. If you know damage is incoming, like let's say you see Howitzer is about to launch his rocket at you, you can dash and it'll give you just enough movement to get out of the way of the rocket. But like, it's not going to save you from a Chimera jump or anything like that. If you see Murdoch's about to ult you, you can dash out of that ult real quick. But if Kalari's coming to ult you, you're probably not going to escape it. Yeah, it's a small dash. You can use it strategically, like run off a cliff and then dash back onto the cliff, kind of like Gideon. You can do the same thing with his teleport. Run off a cliff, somebody chases you, and you can teleport back up to it. But with Gideon, you can have pretty good distance on that. Heck, in some of them, you can even touch the ground and make it back up. With Twin Blast, they need to be really close to you so that when you jump off, they jump off, but then you still have you have to like instantly hit your dash to go back onto the land. Um, his ultimate, you kind of use like the other carry's ultimate, where it's he kind of just shoots like a machine gun, like rapid fire speed, but it does kind of okay damage. It's not really there for the damage. It's there for the range. That's what you really want to use it for. It has like twice the range as your regular basic attack. So if you're chasing somebody down and you've done lots of damage to them and they're getting away from you, you can pop your ult and try to kill them with it. If they're above half health, don't even bother. If they're below a quarter health, go for it. Like you almost can guarantee it so long as they don't break line of sight from you and you can lead your shots properly, go for it. Anyways, those are all the heroes. Something that I haven't talked about are building decks. um, there are 3 things that I recommend about building decks. The first is build decks to your character's strengths. Don't try to build a well-rounded character. Like Narbash, he doesn't have a strong attack. He doesn't have a lot of attack speed. Don't build those things on him to try and make up for the fact that he doesn't have them. Instead, build into him being a support. He has heals. He has movement speed. So build into mana regeneration so you can keep your heals going longer. Build into health so that you can have more health, so that your heals are more useful to yourself and so that you can tank more damage. build into armor because you're going to be tanking shots for your carry. You're going to be body blocking and stuff like that. You know, build to your character's strengths. You know, don't build defense on Twin Blast. Build attack speed. Build lifesteal. Build crit. You know, build things that you would normally build on a carry, like you're playing in Smite. Um, the next thing I recommend for your decks, always have a 3-point ward. It is incredibly useful because if you play a game against a Kalari or you play a game against a Chimera, placing those wards out there helps you know when those people are coming so you can make the proper call to retreat so they can't do anything. And if they show up to your lane and they sit there not doing anything, they're losing experience. But like I said, because the way the jungle works, they're also the entire team is losing experience because the jungle is not clearing out the jungle camps, so nobody is getting the experience from the jungle camps. So incredibly useful to have wards to know where people are, to know what rotations are being done. Very, very useful. Um, learn the ward positions, learn the proper spots to place wards. Smite, you have to learn those things. You kind of have to learn them here. For the most part, they're pretty obvious. You put them at junctions, or if you want, you could put them in laneways, but for the most part, putting them in laneways aren't really useful. It's more useful to know when somebody has entered an area than it is to try and watch your map and know when somebody has left an area. Um, and finally, blink. I put blink on all of my kits the same way I put wards on all of my kits. Blink is incredibly useful. If you played Smite back in Season 1 and Season 2, you'll be familiar with an item called Combat Blink. You could be in combat and use this blink ability. That's the way the blink ability works here. It's 5 points, which isn't a ton, and for the utility that you get, it's really useful, at least as far as I'm concerned. There are other types of blink in the game, but those types of blink require you not to be in combat. I believe they're called teleblink. They do come with some extra benefits from having them, but you do have to not be in combat to use them. So they are much more used for either engaging, like closing the distance, or disengaging, you know, getting away from people. If you've managed to somehow not take damage for the last couple seconds, then you can use your blink to get out. Or if you see people coming, you can blink, just get away. But regular blink, 5-point blink charm. It's already unlocked for you. Universal. When you're building your deck, build and keep it until you get to a good enough part in the game where maybe having those 5 points elsewhere would be more beneficial. Blink is incredibly useful. If you get stuck in Gideon's ult, you can blink out of it. If you get into Greystone's ult, you can blink out of it. If you know, if Chimera dashed up next to you and he's blinked, you can blink away from him, or jumped on you. You can blink away from him. If Kalari ults you, you can wait for her ult to start in the moment she appears, but before she lands her strike, if you time it correctly, you can blink away from her and dodge it. It's incredibly useful. I use it all the time. Highly recommend getting blink. Um, and that's about it. I realize this has probably gone on for a long time, but that's pretty much everything I can tell you about the first 100 games. It's sort of general knowledge. Like I said, the heroes, they're kind of up to your discretion, but the ones that I listed as you should definitely try these, you're going to see those a lot just because of how easy they are to play at low levels of gameplay. The ones I told you to watch out for, try to watch out for them. Something I didn't talk about was in-game communication, and I didn't talk about it because I don't like the way that in-game communication is done. Um, so I'm kind of leaving that for another video. Um, something else I didn't talk about was calling your roles and your positions, and the way that picking is done. Picking's done very similar to ranked style drafting in Smite. So you can see here, they got to pick first, we got to pick second, two people. They got to pick next, two people. We get to pick next, two people. They get to pick next, two people, and then we get last pick. Um, what's useful is calling out your roles, what role you want to play, because you know the way it started was that guy got to pick, then these two people got to pick, then these two people got to pick, then these two people got to pick, and these two people got to pick, and that person got to pick. What this means is if you're in the last couple of pick slots, what you should be doing is you should be looking at what your team has picked and what the enemy team has picked and trying to pick somebody that helps either your team out or hinders their team in some way. Something that is incredibly useful for other people to do is to call their roles. I have had somebody pick Crunch. I play Crunch jungle almost exclusively. That's pretty much the only role I put him in. Turns out they wanted him to be support. Didn't know that. They didn't pick their lane or their role. So I highly recommend you figure out what role you want and indicate that so that your teammates know what role it is they're going in so that they can pick a specific role to fulfill. So like you see here, we had somebody pick a jungle and we had somebody down here who ignored them and picked a jungle as well. That's not good. It's not fun, especially not with Kalari. Kalari doesn't have clear, so this guy can't be the jungle. He has to be the offlaner. But then we had somebody down here who picked jungle as well. Like this isn't good. This isn't how you should be doing things. But then you can end up picking like this, and everybody plays super aggressive, and the enemy team, they picked an actual draft, and they may not know how to handle all the aggression, and so you end up winning. You know. Or you end up with 3 jungles and nobody's clearing any of the lanes because you have 3 jungles, 1 mid, and a guardian, and no carries, and then you get to late game and they have a carry and they're able to push down lanes that you're just not able to do anything about. So pay attention to picks that have been done on your team, pay attention to picks that have been done on the enemy's team, try to figure out who can counter who, try to figure out how you can get around stuff. If all else fails, pick Gideon or Greystone or Chimera. Like those 3. You pick those 3 early, like not so much early, but within your first 100 games, you're guaranteed to at least not do terribly because those 3 at low level gameplay do incredibly well. Um, Anyways, that's all for now. I will holler at you guys later.